Phyllis Schlafly, a legend. Been around doing these things for a good long time, before conservatism was popular even.
That's right.
Yes.
At the beginning, we didn't call ourselves conservatives at all.
Right. Well, what was it? What did you call yourselves?
Republicans.
Just Republicans?
Yeah, Middle West Republicans were, as you read some of what they were doing in the 60s and 50s, you would say it sounds very right wing, but that's the way Midwest Republicans were.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you know, the history of the conservative movement is replete from before the 60s of conservatives not wanting to get involved in the political process and staying out of it. Did you encounter that when you first began your crusades?
Well, not really. I started out, well, as a matter of fact, I helped to found a discussion club in St. Louis in 1956 that is still functioning. And they would hear a speaker every month. And then I helped to found the Cardinal Manzetti Foundation, an anti-communist Catholic group. And so we were fighting communism. And then I was very active in the Illinois Federation of Republican Women. I was the president of it from 1960 to 65. And if you look back at the resolutions that we were passing, a lot of policy resolutions, you would say they sound very right-wing. That's just the way Midwest Republicans were in those days.
It almost seems pretty similar today. The East and West Coast Republicans are a little more effete, if you will, or a little more elitist than us corn-fed folks in the middle. But I hear that you're working on a new initiative. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what gave me a national following was my little book, A Choice Not an Echo, which was the story of Republican National Conventions and the fight between the establishment, which was then headquartered in the Chase Manhattan Bank, and the series of losers they had given us, like Tom Dewey, and the grassroots who wanted to name their own presidential nominee. The big fight was 1952, Taft versus Eisenhower, and we lost that. And when we got to 64, I realized that most of those who were delegates to Republican National Conventions are first-timers, and they needed to know what went before. So A Choice Not an Echo was a chapter on each convention, because that's my hobby. I've been to every one, beginning in 1952, and a delegate at most of them. And so A Choice Not an Echo had a tremendous impact. Every week I meet somebody who say, I came into the conservative movement reading A Choice Not an Echo in 1964. It was a little book that converted people. It converted people from Lyndon Johnson to Barry Goldwater, and from Nelson Rockefeller, who was the establishment candidate, to Barry Goldwater. And we did get Barry Goldwater nominated. And then the establishment tried to banish everybody who was for Goldwater from sight. And they did a pretty good job of that. And we suffered along. The time came when we thought conservatives were very defeatist. They did not believe, after the Goldwater defeat, that we could elect a really conservative candidate. And so that's why we took Nixon. They thought he was the best we could do, which turned out to be not helpful.
Yeah, in many ways he was as liberal as any Democrat would have been.
Yeah. And so then we started all over again with Ronald Reagan, and were successful in 1980, and took over the party again. And well, that was a great success. I think he was the best president of the 20th century, and elected him twice, and got the party on the straight and narrow conservative path. And then we lost it to the establishment again, and they've given us a bunch of real losers. And I'm talking about Bob Dole, John McCain, and then Mitt Romney. And even when they did elect somebody, who was George W. Bush, he did many of the things. He was almost like the phrase that was coined for Tom Dewey, "Me Too."
Mm-hmm.
It's always like "Me Too." Whatever the Democrats said, "Me Too."
Right.
And so he spent more money than anybody else, and he was very much a globalist. He tried to give us open borders, first through the North American Union and then through the amnesty that he tried to put through with Kennedy and McCain. And so now we have this same battle again. It's the establishment against the grassrooters. And if we want to, the establishment likes a certain type of person who calls himself a moderate, will do what he's told, vote the way he's told, and will not talk about certain issues. They don't want him to talk about the social or the moral issues. They don't even want him to talk about the national defense issues, and which is all a terrible mistake, because that's where all the money is. And in fact, it's the breakdown of marriage that is costing us nearly $1 trillion a year.
And it's certainly obviating or destroying Reagan's three-legged stool.
That's right.
As he said, and the social issues were one of the main important parts of that that he spoke to.
One of the three legs.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. And apparently they don't even want us to talk about the other leg, the national security leg. I mean, Obama's been trying to push through all of these UN treaties, made a tremendous effort on the UN Treaty on Disabilities, and every one of them is a big cut into our sovereignty. And they set up a bunch of these foreign so-called experts who are supposed to tell us what to do. And that particular treaty is a real takeaway of parents' rights over any type of handicapped kid.
Right.
And Obama has said he wants a... Are you going to hear my speech tomorrow? I'm giving you my speech tomorrow. But he wants a zero nuclear world. Well, we all know, it's like the old bumper strip. If guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns.
Right.
So if nukes are outlawed, only terrorists will have nukes. It's pretty obvious to all of us, but Obama has this crazy idea, and so does the man he just made Secretary of Defense. Belongs to at least two of these globalist organizations that are trying to get rid of all nuclear weapons. Of course, if we can get rid of ours, but nobody's telling North Korea to get rid of theirs.
Right. Well, and again, that also breaks Reagan's one of Reagan's points of trust but verify, and we're just not even bothering to try to verify. And if it were up to Obama, we'd just do away with them all.
Trust them.
Yeah. All right. Right.
And so I see it. I see the present situation as a real choice, not an echo fight again. It's the choice between the establishment, whose voice seems to be Karl Rove. And I tell people, when we were fighting Goldwater, the establishment was headquartered in the Chase Manhattan Bank. But now it's Karl Rove, and they just give us a bunch of losers.
Yeah. Okay. And they give us a bunch of losers because why do you think, what is their motivation for holding back all of the actual ideology and trying to soft sell everything?
Well, that's interesting. They really don't disagree with the Democrats. They're not against big spending and a lot of debt. A lot of them are making money out of it, and they're not against big government. They just think they ought to run it themselves. And so I think that's part of it. And then, of course, Karl Rove had at least $300 million to spend on campaigns, and he only won, I think it was 9 out of 31. It was a dismal prospect. a dismal result. And I hope that the donors to those campaigns realize they didn't get much on their investment. But what they spent all their money on TV ads.
Right.
And of course, Obama spent his money on a very efficient and sophisticated ground campaign, getting people to go out and locating the Obama voters, and then harassing them and nagging them until they got to the polls. So they made use of early voting, which was, I think, the principal reason Obama won, is their effective use of early voting to harass people and watch them vote. For example, Michelle Obama gave a speech at the university, one of the universities in Iowa, I don't know which one it was, soon before the election, and then they had an early voting place practically across the street. So now, if you've heard the spiel, just march right out, go across the street and vote. And then there was one state, I think it was Florida, where they got the court to say they had to keep the polls open on Sunday. So they sent the buses up to churches where they thought people would be voting for Obama, and load up the buses, take them to vote. For all I know, that they're going to 2 or 3 precincts to vote.
Right, right. Well, I mean, and on that note, we have places like St. Louis, where they have more people registered to vote than they have actual legitimate voters in the district.
Yeah, now that is true of Philadelphia. I'm not completely sure it's true of St. Louis, but it's been often said about Philadelphia. And then there were several instances, well, like there was a Democratic state legislator in Arkansas who confessed to sending out absentee ballots, telling them to vote but don't seal them, hand them back to me unsealed. If they voted for the wrong guy, he pitched them, and then only cast the others. He confessed to it. I didn't make this up. And then there was the Democrat who was telling how he could fake utility bills to subject for picture ID, which is one of the things that's accepted in the few states that have a requirement of picture ID. But we've got to clean up the voter rolls. There's too much fraud going on. But mainly, it was their efficient ground campaign of identifying their people and getting out to vote. And Romney didn't have that at all.
No.
In fact, the system he thought he had didn't even work. It broke down.
Right.
Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did. The same thing was true for McCain. I was in Columbus, Ohio during that election, and my job at that time was to go from polling station to polling station just to see what the Obama people were doing. But everyone I went to in the city had dozens of Obama people. I never saw one McCain person there to help anybody or
as an observer.
Right.
Right.
Right. Or even outside as a rallying point.
Handing out
Right.
literature. Well, they covered it, and of course, with early voting, it's just kind of almost impossible to get that many poll watchers. That's why another reason they like it. I heard at one of my Pennsylvania meetings that somebody who had been an observer said if they don't have any Republican poll watcher, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Democrat will say, well, we'll just vote all the rest of the people. We don't have to vote. So you know, when this guy who spent his whole life writing books on Lyndon Johnson, isn't his name Carroll or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know, everybody knows that Lyndon Johnson got elected the first time for the Senate when they held back a precinct to see how many votes they needed. And that's why he was always called Landslide Lyndon.
Right,
I think it was 67 votes, something like that. Well, Carroll, in his research, found that in that precinct, the votes were all cast alphabetically.
Of course, they all came in alphabetically, right through the door.
So,
oh, Lord.
So what I want to tell the conservatives, the Republican Party is the only vehicle to save this country. We have a two-party system, and that's probably Colleen. Would you like to answer the door?
Sure, I shall.
Probably my employee is calling. Come in, Colleen.
Hello.
Come in. I'm giving an interview to Breitbart, so just sit down on the bed and it'll take a little longer, but Breitbart's important.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you wanted to tell the conservatives?
I want to tell them that the only vehicle to save this country is the Republican Party. And we have to retake the Republican Party for the grassroots to run it and pick our candidates and get all these establishment candidates that they ran for the Senate last year, that Karl Rove ran TV ads for. He only won 9 out of 31 he ran ads for. And I don't think the ads are so important anymore. They tell me the young people don't watch TV at all. They get everything off of the internet.
Yeah, they watch shows that are stored.
The older people, I haven't gotten one yet, but they have this gizmo that deletes the ads.
Yeah.
So you can watch your favorite programs without seeing any ads. I haven't got one, but they tell me that plenty of them have them. So, but the ads are productive for the people who buy them. They get a percentage back.
Yeah, the consultants and whatnot.
Yeah, the consultants clean up. But it was a badly run campaign, and of course, Romney presented him. Well, he only talked about the economic issues. He didn't talk about any of the other issues. And then he presented himself as a CEO who could run things, but really he couldn't even run his own staff. So how's he going to run the country?
Right.
Well, the establishment is when you look at the time. Well, Marco Rubio is a good example. Of course, the establishment did not want him at all. They supported Governor Christ, and Governor Christ turned Democrat after it was all over.
He did.
That's kind of candidate they support. And they supported the establishment candidate against Ted Cruz. And the non-establishment candidates, they really want to beat. It isn't just that they want to elect their guy. They really want to defeat the grassroots choice because they don't do what they're told. They don't vote the way they're instructed. And they just don't want them around. They talk about issues that the establishment doesn't want to talk about.
Well, and speaking of Ted Cruz, he's already getting beaten up by many of the senators on the Hill, the old line senators, for speaking out of turn and speaking too early in his young career.
That's right. You're a freshman senator. You're not supposed to talk for 5 years.
Right.
And but he beat a very wealthy establishment guy.
And he was definitely supported by the Tea Party movement and the
Definitely,
grassroots
and
vote.
they thought they had a Tea Party. You know, the media thought they were getting the Tea Party airhead. Were they surprised?
Well, I want to thank you very much for
Okay.
giving me some time. And if you have anything closing statement?
I don't think so. I think we
covered pretty good swath of history there. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this.